Good morning. These days are certainly not business as usual for me. Mid-March to mid-April, I was to have made my annual visit to the Democratic Republic of Congo to check in with Mennonite church leaders there. Just 2 days before that trip was to have taken place, the coronavirus situation made it increasingly obvious that international travel of any kind, except for the most urgent of situations, needed to stop. So I stayed home, reluctantly. Given the rapid spread of the virus in Europe and the beginnings of the same in Africa, that reluctance turned to relief that I was not on the road at a time when many countries were restricting travel and so forth. I began to settle into a routine and started working on a series of reports that I needed to do. As the days passed and I began to be in contact with African colleagues, I experienced some heart heaviness. This is my last year as Executive Coordinator for Africa Inter-Mennonite Mission, AIMM. I began to realize that this Congo trip may never happen, and that therefore I would not have the opportunity to say thank you and goodbye to a number of friends and colleagues with whom I have worked over the last 15 years. I am in lament because of that. I also wonder about the future of AIMM, this wonderful organization that is a series of beautiful relationships across continents and cultures. I wonder, will we survive COVID-19? I had hoped to turn over to my successors a thriving and vital organization. Will it instead be sickly, struggling to breathe, and in need of a ventilator? I lament this time of testing for AIMM. Most of all, I lament that almost 3,000 years after the Old Testament prophets shared their stirring visions of a world where the poor would be lifted up into stability and justice would shine, our world seems, if anything, more broken, farther away from equal access to life-giving resources. Why? I lament that our family members, our sisters and brothers in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Burkina Faso, our partners in Benin, all need to face into the threat of coronavirus at a much different level than you or me at Waterford Mennonite Church. Well, here in the USA, we have 342 intensive care beds for each million people. Across Africa, there's an average of 5 ICU beds per million persons. There are on average 50 working ventilators per nation across Africa. This means that if any of my or your friends and colleagues in Africa or their family members contract COVID-19 and become seriously ill, the chances of them receiving any kind of emergency life-giving care are next to nil. How is that right? How is that just? And yet, I remain hopeful because I know that God's presence, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and God's intimate, tender, and constant love for every single human being ever created, this is a reality that no amount of suffering will ever change. Romans chapter 8 talks to us about this. In fact, suffering is one of those things that breaks us open as human beings and reveals to ourselves our deep need for God, not only as an idea, but as a living presence that only faith can grasp. So maybe in God's economy, Our African sisters and brothers are actually a bit better off than we are because there are less props standing between them and the reality of God. Maybe in a small way, this coronavirus situation is doing the same thing for us here in the United States, taking away some of those props that separate us from God. God's love through Jesus accompanies us everywhere, in suffering, through death, and into resurrection. This is the foundation of reality. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. Amen.